Most people don't fail at wealth because they don't earn enough. They fail because they never learned the difference between money that passes through you and money that works for you. Oliver is 24. He's got a job. Not a bad job, not a great job. The kind of job where you tell people what you do and they nod politely and change the subject. $40,000 a year, which after taxes becomes about $2,700 a month landing in his bank account. $2,700 every month to cover rent, food, transportation, healthcare, and somehow build a future. That's not a salary. That's a math problem. And here's where most people's story ends. They look at that number, they look at the cost of living, and they conclude that wealth is simply not on the menu for people like them. Oliver recognized that his income was just his raw material. What he was terrible at, and what most people are terrible at, was the manufacturing process, what you actually do with it once it arrives. So he audited his life. Not with a spreadsheet at first, just a long, uncomfortable look at where the money was actually going. And what he found was not one catastrophic problem. It was dozens of small, quiet ones. The first enemy wasn't debt in the abstract. It was consumer debt specifically. Credit cards, buy now, pay later schemes, personal loans for things that had already been used, enjoyed, and forgotten. These are the financial instruments that look like breathing room but are actually a slow bleed. Here's the math that Oliver made himself stare at. $3,000 in credit card debt at 20% interest, making minimum payments. That debt takes over 30 years to fully clear. And by the time it's gone, you've paid more than $10,000 for whatever it was you originally bought. A TV, some clothes, a weekend trip that's now a distant memory. $10,000. The cruelty isn't just the number, it's the opportunity cost. That $10,000 invested modestly over the same period doesn't stay $10,000. It multiplies, it compounds, it becomes something that actually changes your trajectory. Instead, it went to a credit card company. Oliver had a specific insight here, one that reframed everything. At his income level, he literally could not afford to let money flow toward interest payments. He wasn't choosing between good and better options. He was choosing between escaping and staying trapped. So he got ruthless. He targeted 7 to 10% of his gross income, around $300 a month, exclusively toward eliminating debt, not managing it, destroying it. Where did he find $300 when there was seemingly nothing left? Food. The average American household spends over $600 a month on food. Groceries, restaurants, the $14 salad you bought because you didn't have time to meal prep, the coffee that felt like a small reward but showed up 6 times a week on the statement. $600. Oliver got it down to $400. Meal planning, strategic shopping, not deprivation, strategy. $200 freed every single month. Transportation. The average car payment in America is over $700 a month. $700 for a depreciating asset, something that is worth less the minute you drive it than it was the minute before. Oliver did the math on financing a $25,000 car. Monthly payments around $450, 5 or 6 years. By the time that loan is paid off, the car is worth maybe $10,000, and you've paid $30,000 for it. But that's still not the real number. The real number is what that $450 monthly could have become if it had been working for you instead. At an 8% annual return, over 6 years, that's over $40,000. So you're not just buying a $25,000 car. You're spending $25,000 and forfeiting $40,000 in potential wealth. The total cost isn't the sticker price, it's $65,000. So Oliver bought a used car for $8,000 cash. Same function, gets him to work, gets him home. Does not require a monthly payment, gap insurance, or the low-grade anxiety of negative equity. Yes, Older cars have maintenance costs. Oliver factored that in. Even spending $2,000 a year on repairs, he came out dramatically ahead. And there was the psychological weight of owning something outright. No payment hanging over the month, no number to dread. His ego did not love this decision, but his high-yield bank account balance that grew his money at 5% reflected his gains. Housing. This is where it gets genuinely difficult, because housing is not a line item you can optimize with meal planning. It's your biggest expense, and for most people on Oliver's income, it's consuming 30 to 40% of take-home pay. The conventional guidance says spend no more than 30% of gross income on housing, about $1,000 a month on a $40,000 salary. Oliver got it to $700. A roommate, a less trendy neighborhood, a smaller space than his peers were choosing. He didn't love it, but that $300 monthly difference is $3,600 a year, redirected entirely toward debt and eventually toward building wealth. Temporary discomfort, compounding advantage. Once the debt was gone, Oliver's financial picture changed structurally. And this is where the story shifts from damage control to something more interesting. Emergency fund first. 3 months of expenses. Not a year's worth. 3 months. Enough to handle a job loss, a car repair, a medical bill without destroying everything he'd built. Enough to give him the confidence to take small, calculated risks. Oliver knew that the emergency fund isn't just a financial buffer, it's a psychological one. When you have zero runway, every decision is made from fear. You can't negotiate for a better salary because you can't afford to lose the one you have. You can't quit a bad job. You can't start anything. You're just surviving and hoping nothing goes wrong. 3 months of expenses changes that. Not dramatically, but enough. Once that was locked in, every additional dollar went to work. Oliver's next move was the Roth IRA, and it is genuinely one of the most underutilized financial tools available to people in his income bracket. At $40,000 a year, maxing the Roth, $7,000 annually, about $580 a month, is aggressive. Oliver didn't always hit the maximum, but even half of that, compounding over time, produces numbers that seem impossible until you do the actual math. $3,000 a year. Starting at 25, 8% average return. By 65, that becomes over $800,000 tax-free from $3,000 a year, which is $250 a month, which is less than most people spend on things they can't clearly name at the end of each month. And here is where most people stop. They pay off the debt. They set up the emergency fund. They open the Roth IRA. They feel responsible, maybe even proud. And then they quietly go back to spending everything that remains. Oliver didn't stop there, because he understood that all the optimization in the world applied to a $40,000 income has a ceiling. And the ceiling is uncomfortable. You can cut your food budget and drive a beater car and live with a roommate, and it helps, genuinely helps. But at some point, you've squeezed everything possible out of $40,000. So he thought about income differently. Not the 3% annual raise that barely keeps pace with inflation. Something more deliberate. He looked at skills he already had, or skills he could develop quickly, and he began building something on the side. High school math tutoring, $20 an hour. He eventually turned that knowledge into an online course, something that generated income without requiring him to show up and trade an hour for $1 every time. Income that has the potential to grow beyond your time. He wasn't interested in driving for a rideshare company, not because there's anything wrong with it, but because it offers no leverage. You earn while you drive. You stop earning when you stop driving. Time is finite. That model is a ceiling. He wanted something that could scale. When his income grew from $40,000 to $50,000, eventually to $65,000, Oliver made a decision that sounds simple but is almost impossibly hard to actually execute. He kept living on $35,000, not because he enjoyed austerity, but because he'd watched what happened to people around him when their income went up. They moved to a nicer apartment, bought a newer car, started eating at better restaurants. Their expenses rose in lockstep with their income, sometimes faster, and at the end of every month, they were in exactly the same position. Lifestyle inflation is not a character flaw. It's a deeply human response to having more money. You feel like you've earned something better, and in some ways, you have. The mistake is confusing better with more expensive. Oliver's extra $25,000, the gap between what he earned and what he spent, went entirely toward wealth building. Not upgrading appearances, not performing success, actual compounding structural wealth. And the thing about reaching that level of financial cushion is that it changes the quality of your decisions. Not just your financial decisions, every decision. He could take career risks, walk away from a situation that wasn't working, and he could invest in skills without terror about the short-term income gap. He had options. And options, quiet, private, invisible options, are what financial security actually feels like. Not a bigger apartment, not a newer car. Options. There's a moment in almost every financial story where someone gets a windfall of some kind. A tax refund, a bonus, a gift. Oliver got a $1,200 tax refund, and he described the experience of sitting with that money as genuinely difficult. His brain, trained by years of scarcity, immediately began cataloging. A new laptop, catch up on some things he'd put off, a trip, things that felt earned, justified, overdue. He put it in the Roth IRA. He had done the math often enough that $1,200 felt different to him. That shift, from seeing money as something to spend to seeing it as something that can produce more money, is not a financial strategy. It's closer to a rewiring. And it's the one change that underlies every other good decision he made. So where does Oliver's story actually land? With all the right moves and decisions Oliver made, he was able to retire having become a millionaire at just age 46. He is free, and the compounding keeps working for him. He still earns from ventures that make money for him without requiring his actual time and presence like his online courses. Oliver was not a tech founder, not an inheritance recipient, not someone who got lucky with a stock pick. He built a net worth on a salary that most people would look at and conclude, reasonably, leaves no room for wealth building. He eliminated debt aggressively. He built a small emergency fund and stopped there. He used the Roth IRA systematically. He resisted lifestyle inflation as his income grew. He developed skills and income streams with leverage, and he stayed disciplined long enough for compound interest to stop being a concept and start being a balance. All of this requires the willingness to behave differently than the people around you, to make choices that look strange, even slightly embarrassing in the short term, in exchange for options that most people simply never get. Most people at that income level don't build wealth. The reason is that they're playing the exact same game as everyone else. Oliver changed the game to his favor. If you learned a thing or two from this story, please like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.